This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Permian Basin Oil and Gas Magazine, delivering trusted oil and gas news and industry insight. We appreciate their support of real conversations like the one you're about to hear. Subscribe today at pbog.com. What we've seen is that federal regulation has really kind of dropped off, it seems like, generally speaking. But in its stead, statewide regulation seems to have increased. And so this session is going to be talking about some of those changes, how that affects you. And as Purvis mentioned, I think we got kind of an all-star group of individuals here. I tried to count up how much experience, and I got up to about 120 years. Now, give or take. Now, most of y'all will think that Mark represents the bulk of that, the 100+ years, but that isn't quite the case. It's shared around. So let me make a quick introduction of all the people that are here on the session. Mark Hickhouse is with Permian Regulatory Solution, his own firm that advises in New Mexico and Texas, has a wealth of experience from Apache, Exco, most notably probably 20-year service at the Railroad Commission as district office head of that office. And as I know most of us will be excited about, is a Texas A&M grad, right? Okay, thank you. Secondly, Kristen Gregg, who is with G4 Regulatory Solutions, a fantastic firm here in the city helping on regulatory issues in Texas and New Mexico. Just came from Diamondback, where she spent 8 years as a regulatory manager, so a wealth of experience. Is overcoming that she went to OU. So, there we go. So, thirdly, we have Terry Statham, who has 37 years of experience, so she might have the lead on this. She serves as regulatory manager for Paloma Resources, but a wealth of experience with Conoco, Cimarex, Sandridge, huge focus on New Mexico and with the paperwork associated with that regulatory entity. And then lastly, but not least, Philip Levasseur, who is a regulatory compliance manager at Coterra and has a wealth of experience not only there, but previous companies that have been kind of merged in there, Cabot, Cimarex. I find his background especially fascinating because he served in different leadership roles within township up in Pennsylvania before. So he's seen it from the other side as well and has fantastic perspective from that. Again, we're lucky that he went to Texas A&M Corpus Christi, but we still claiming, but also got his master's from another state institution that I forget the name of. UT, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's lead off with something that Stephen actually talked about on inactive wells. As we all know, there's 159,000 roughly inactive wells out there. 26,000 are delinquent. If those all get plugged, we're talking, a couple $2 billion of funds. So a huge focus on inactive wells, orphan wells. Because of that, there's a lot of rule changes on inactive wells. How long can you keep them out? The 15-year time limit. Questions about P4s, P5s, bonding requirements. Kristen, I'd like for you to kick off with some thoughts on what should we be worrying about or think about on inactive wells, plugging wells.
Yeah, sure. So, last legislative session, Senate Bill 1150 was passed, and that has to do with the inactive wells. So, what is put into place and what the commission this year will be working on in the second half of the year that will become active 2027 is any well that has been that's over 25 years, has been inactive for 15 years, will now have to have a contingency claim. And the idea behind this is to get ahead of orphan wells so that the number that we have stays the same by reducing them on the other end. So what we'll do is, as wells that have been inactive for over 15 years, we will take those, create that plan, and it'll be about a 5-year plan. And let's say I'm operator A. I have these wells. I've created a plan for them, and then I go and sell them to Mark. If I sell those wells to Mark, he then has the remaining years that's left out of those 5 to do something with that well. Bring it back online, plug it. Basically, your only two options. So if I've had that well for 5 years and there's 1 year left, she only has 1 year left to do something with that well. So as we are all doing M&A and our due diligence as we continue to buy out other companies and grow that way, those are things you're going to have to start looking at because those wells are then you're going to fall into your budget plans on how many years are left in those inactive wells. So the second half of this year, I think we'll start seeing the trade groups pick up a lot more, be a lot busier, and focus on how we work on the commission on best practices with this. So then when it goes into effect next year, we're all on the same page. So I think that's something as a company you'll start being asked to get involved in. And that through PBPA, through PEXOGA, that we will want and need your feedback on those things as well. So that we're all kind of a united front as we move forward with that with the commission.
So just for clarification, at the year 15, they have to do plug, or is there ability to have extensions on that?
That is the point once you hit 15 years of inactive over a 25-year aged well, you will then have to come up with that 5-year contingency plan, and that will then be in effect.
Okay. What about, and this might be a question for you, Philip, being in New Mexico, but bonding requirements. There's a lot of talk about increasing those requirements, and in New Mexico, there already is significant requirements in that area.
Yes. So for many of us that are operating on federal and state lands, we've experienced the transition from nationwide bonds to statewide bonds of the BLM. And with that, we've come to realize that there are a lot of legacy issues that may have not been properly closed out with record title holdership. And anybody that's in the chain of title there has some exposure. And it's very important to make sure that if you're operating on federal lands in the state offices, that you have your names properly addressed. If you've been acquired, your addresses have changed, make sure that you're getting the notices. Because if you're the last one holding the hot potato on federal lands, you could possibly be the one that's going to have to pay for the P&A. So with that, we're also experiencing with the Mexico State Land Office a lot of concerns about their bonding obligations. So May 26th, comments are going to be closing out. There's going to be a public comment period from the 27th to the 28th. There'll be a hearing, but things are quickly evolving. NMOGA, PBPA, IPAN are all working together to make sure that our concerns on state level bonding concerning inactive wells or marginal wells are going to be addressed. But I think one of the biggest things that we can do as an industry, the best defense and offense, is make sure that your land departments are working hand in hand with the regulatory department. It's simple things like keeping your addresses up to date. And speaking to Texas, with regard to the inactive wells and orphan and abandoned wells, you may not realize that you have an interest still with the Railroad Commission. If you're, let's say you held a lot of wells, they're on your P4, you may have some incomplete plugging documentation. And it's really important for your regulatory department and your land department to assure that things are clearly exchanged out of your name. And if there's improperly completed plugging work, let's say you plug back to a zone, you need to make sure that the plugging paperwork was 100%, because let's say if you didn't have the 20 feet of cement, you could just be hanging out there on the zombie lease and you may not be aware of it. So again, I want to emphasize the cooperation and coordination between the land departments and the regulatory departments. A lot of us have a lot of inbound, outbound deals. I'm sitting next to Terry. We're working on some of those between Coterra and Paloma. But because we have great communication and have a deep understanding what has to be transacted, we're not leading any hanging chats. But I would want to make sure everybody's very aware that is something that's coming up, especially on federal and state lands.
Mark, you had something to add?
Yes, I wanted to follow up on a point Philip just made, and this is a good point. Those of you that file completions have probably seen wells that get plugged back, and you're going from a formation to a second formation, and you file that completion, and that plug, though, between those formations is not sufficient per Rule 14. For instance, you may set a bridge plug, but you didn't put the 20 foot of cement on it, or it may be a cement plug that's less than 100 feet. The commission will accept those, but that well's coded as a partial plug. You can look on the proration schedule and see all these partial plugs. Those are your well. They are your responsibility. When it comes time to plug that well, you will be required to go back down below your plug back to that initial plug and spot a plug that meets Rule 14 specifications. My advice is don't ever do a partial plug. If you're going to set the bridge plug, you've already got the wire line out there. Dump the 20 feet on it, get a W-15, file it for record, and it goes away. It won't come back to haunt you like Philip just said. These are how the legacy wells come back and make your P5 renewal miserable.
So let's move to the permitting of wells in Texas and New Mexico. I know there's a big question about pool code. Terry, do you want to kind of address some of that?
Sure. PBPA and NMOGA are working together we formed a work group for pool codes to look at them in New Mexico and do a detailed look. We have over 8,000 pool codes in New Mexico, and I hope that we can come to a conclusion as to some of those pool codes being able to, I guess the Purple Sage, there were like, I don't know how many pool codes that kind of combine them all together. And so we are looking at some of that for New Mexico. So any of you guys that would love to be on the pool code work group, we'd love to have you.
And help me understand what the specific issue is for pool codes or what they're looking to change.
So we may have, bone spring pools, we may have 20 of them for a particular section. And where it's come into play recently is during forced pool hearings. That we think that we maybe have all the pools listed, but there's no really good pool maps that are available to the industry. And so we get there and find out that maybe there was not 2 pools, but actually 3. And I think Philip can talk more about that.
Well, it's a privilege to sit up here with Tara because she's actually the mother of the Purple Sage Wool Camp. And so with that,
That's a lovely title.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
she's done great work as her career, and it's a real privilege to sit up here because the reality is every time we drill another well, we're defining the outer bounds of these formations. And so if the MOCD is behind on completions, therefore there's a lack of data. And I think many of us that operate in New Mexico recognize it is very difficult to get that pool definition. And so what we're trying to do is encourage the OCD to work with potentially, New Mexico State or one of the universities to ensure that the same model that we have in Texas is carried out. So I just think, we need to catch up on our completions.
Period. Thank you, Phil. Mark, what about commingling and the effects that that has on permitting?
That's a good question. Commingling is a creature upon its own. In New Mexico, commingling is an issue. The federal BLM, the state land office especially, and the OCD all had the fingers in commingling, and it becomes a process that becomes overwhelming very quickly. In Texas, we're lucky that the commingling requirements are much, much simpler. In Texas, if you have, for instance, identical interests and you are just simply combining production, the hurdle for a commingling permit was very, very low. If you have diverse interests, the royalties, the ownership, the working interests are different, then you may have to provide notice, but it's still a relatively simple process. Commingling is becoming in Texas more and more important as operators try to cut expenses. They cut overhead, they cut the number of facilities they have to maintain. More and more facilities are becoming these centralized production facilities, especially in these new horizontal plays. And these are almost always commingled facilities that require B17 from the Railroad Commission. The commission's process is fairly clear-cut. We're lucky in that regard. New Mexico, not so much. In fact, I've talked to Philip at length about this, and Philip's deeply involved in the New Mexico commingling issues and trying to get, his company in front of some of the compliance issues there, and it can be a tough road in New Mexico. So prepare early and prepare often in New Mexico for coming in.
Seems like another issue that is really becoming so important is brought about because of drilling techniques, horseshoes, U-turns.
Companies are realizing the economic advantage is incredible because you're eliminating that 10,000 foot of vertical hole for essentially one wellbore. It's an incredible advantage. And the state of Texas has been very willing to permit these. Those of you that do these wells know that you got the P16 acreage assignments you have to deal with. If you have a pooled unit, you have to have the P12. These all have to match. If you've got depth severances, you've got horizontal ownership benches in the field. Those have to be specified to the commission, and that becomes an issue. The commission wants a depth, but sometimes over let's say you've got a 3-mile lateral, that depth interval may change every time you enter a new lease. May be descriptive, related to a formation top or bottom, a formation pitch. It may be related to a depth from the surface. It may be related to a depth subsea. So those tops can actually change as a well is drilled, and you can have a well essentially porpoise to stay in that ownership. The drilling becomes more and more complex. And all of this needs to be considered in the permitting up front. The permitting person and the land department and the drilling department really need to cooperate and get on the same page so that we don't have to re-permit this. You can go pull up the commission's permit query, the W1 query, and look at how many re-permits there are. And it's incredible how many times wells are permitted 3, 4, 5 times because these issues are not thought out up front. It is much more effective in terms of personnel resource, cost to do it right the first time, but that requires communication, and sometimes it's difficult.
So is it mainly a lack of communication between like the drilling and the regulatory? Because it seems like once you drill the well, you should have your NWD data that allows you to know where your heights are or your depths are, and you should be able to permit it accordingly. Or am I missing something?
No,
Just very well.
in the ideal world, that's how it would work. You're right, Grant. That's how it would work, but we're not in the ideal world. Your drilling department decides they're going to go take a break, and you get a little bit wander. Most fields are 330 from the lease line, perpendicular to the wellbore path. Some fields have a 50-foot box or a 33-foot box that allows you to vary. So if you cross that 330, you're still legal as long as you're in the box and as long as you're not taking advantage of that intentionally. You cross that box and you're at 279, now you've got a Rule 37 because your drilling department didn't keep that well on track. Now that you've got a Rule 37, you've got to re-permit that well. And you hope to hell that you're the offset operator so you go self-lay. If you're not, you're just going to be held hostage by the offset operator. No question. They're going to want something in return for a waiver. It's going to be geologic information or completion information or a percent override. There will be a penalty to pay to get that waiver. Everybody gets the waiver, but it's not always cost-free. This stuff needs to be taken care of up front in consultation with drilling, the land, and the regulatory people. The communication is key.
In the Permian Basin, our leases have become so complex. You have so many different owners at every single depth. And as leases queue out or you do deals with other companies, your severance has changed. So these porpoise wells that Mark's talking about, you're going to have operators coming in here, and in track 1, they might be here, but in track 2, their ownership could be up here. So then before they get into track 2, they're having to say 100 feet off that line, then go into their depth severance on the next one. And the same thing is they're going through each track that they're drilling those 2 and 3 mile wells. So land department has got to work so closely with the regulatory teams on communicating where these depth severances are if you do not have full ownership. And that's where you see also a lot of miscommunication happening and these rules that Mark's talking about coming into play after the well is drilled, because your drilling team doesn't know specifically where you are. You're going to hit everything after and have some major cleanup to do on the backside. And that's where you really see a lot of issues come in because until those issues are cleaned up, you can't actually produce your well bore. They've all got to be cleaned up ahead of time.
Mark, you have some additional comments on?
Yeah. First of all, y'all heard the discussion about the purple sage and the pools in New Mexico. And the purple sage is the New Mexico equivalent of a resource field, basically. New Mexico does not do pools the way Texas does fields. So those of you that work in Texas, you're used to fields being defined geologically by formation typically. And it doesn't matter where your well is, as long as it's in that formation and that field assignment's reasonable, you get to put the well in that field. Not so in New Mexico. It is geographic. If you're in this section or this quarter section that's been designated that field, that's where it has to go. You don't have a choice. And it becomes very, very complicated getting that sorted out when you've got horizontals that cross 2 to 3, 4, 5 different pool designations. It becomes a problem. So that's what they're talking about there. Those of you that work in Texas, you're lucky. Trust me on that. Some random things. Y'all had seen the news recently, wells blowing out. There's one last year at Toya that blew out with like Old Faithful. There were a couple down in Crane County a couple years ago that blew out. These are becoming an issue. I've had a conversation or two with commission, kind of with people I work with on a regular basis. Everybody needs to understand the commission is going to do what it takes to protect the groundwater resources. That may mean shutting in your injection well. That may mean backflowing your injection well. That may mean forcing operators into what's called an OLERA, Operator-Led Response Emergency Action Plan. They're now drafting guidelines for how to implement that. If they declare an oil and gas emergency under a certain law, then they can form this group and you may not get a choice. You may have to participate in it because you're nearby. And this group will generally include, at a minimum, the operator of the lease where the well is breaking out, causing a problem. It will include the SWD operator that's nearby. He's probably been ordered to shut in, among other things. And it may include the producers of the wells nearby. So the commission's now formulating a procedure to put this into place. PBPA and the other trades and the operators are working with the commission to get this into a workable format. One good thing about it is it does protect operators that contribute from civil liability. It doesn't protect them from financial liability, however, because the commission doesn't have the budget to plug all these wells. They're going to look at the operator, be aware that's coming, it's here, basically. So just heads up on that. Commission's changing its MIT scheduling process. Everybody aware of that? They sent out a notice to operator. It's available on the website. And y'all really should check these on a regular basis because it's amazing what you can learn. They look something like this. And this one's important because they're going to quit mailing MIT schedulers for your H5s. That's going to stop. When's that stopping? Right now. Stopping tomorrow, in fact.
So that means you have to proactively look to see your deadlines.
They're going to email the schedule along with a list of compliance issues and along with H5 violations as phrases. But that's going to the P5 email address of record, which is probably some corporate secretary in Houston, not the person in Midland that's taking care of it. Make sure you'll cut line of communication so that that information is sent to you. Now, the alternative is you can go into that system we all know and love called Lone Star and pull it. But if anybody here has ever used Lone Star, you'll find a 2-story balcony you jump off of before you get to it.
Whoever is on your Lone Star account gets that notification. So whatever that email is, that's where everything is going to go to for the MIT scheduling, violations, and everything else. So if you have another person added to that, do it now. Make sure you're starting to check that regularly. It's the same person who got everything for your CID and the top secret, supply chain map, all that kind of stuff. It will go there.
Anybody here file Flurry exceptions, Rule 32 exceptions? Oh, I know Phil.
Okay, there's 2. Only 2 people do that.
All right. If you are flaring gas for a period exceeding 24 hours, you have to give permit to do that. That was a permissible activity now. And the commission does follow up on that stuff. I understand their inspectors have been advised to record where they see flares, the date and the time, and then back check whether permits were issued permits. There is now, any of you know Gil Bahano. He used to be at the commission as Central Oil and Gas Director. He's now at BTX. So this is the Gil Bahano Memorial Rule. He got some industry action to change a couple of the Delaware fields and Spring Ridge Trend that will allow central production facilities to have a flare tolerance, generally 1%, without having a specific permit. Look at the new revised field rules if you operate in those fields and you operate these large production facilities, which are becoming more and more common. You may be able to exempt yourself from permitting using this new field rule. Take a look at that. Just again, if you can do it, then absolutely do it. And I think I'll share, Kurt.
All right. You sure? Okay. Well, you'll have another fun at this apple in a moment, but Chris, let's change topics to PIB rules. Obviously, not obviously, but we will be having a presentation later this afternoon. Chris, I think you're making on chapter 4, but give us your perspective of what's happening with the new PIB rules and closed loop systems and things like that.
So over this last year, it has gone into effect for the new Chapter 4 rules, which all of you guys knew. For you, I think I worked on that big rule for a couple the better part of 3 years. And over probably the last 6 to 8 months, we've been working really closely with the Environmental Authority Department, which is Chris's Ruth, on filing these new EP1s, the EP2s for Schedule B pits, getting everything lined out. And I will say, as we have started registering everything, we started off rocky, but we all know that we would. It takes a long time to get responses back. But as we've all gotten more familiar with the process, the turnaround time's gotten a lot quicker. And we're really kind of now figuring out the best processes on things because I'm sure, some of the midstream companies, some of the larger operators, you have these large pits that are out there that used to be NCFR, which was, you had to have a permit for them. They're Asia limit pits. Now they fall under Schedule B. So how do you get those changed from the current, into Schedule B pits from NCFR? What do you need to do to change that? All of you are now Schedule A, which was really anything to do with drilling activities. We're figuring out, and I think getting to a much better place. And I hope, Chris, you would agree. We work really closely with them, not only through the trades, but with some of the operators on just figuring out best processes. Okay, for changing of pits, from A to B or B to A. How do we go about doing that? How do we get that message out to everyone? And so they're actually going to present this summer. Misty is from her group, and she's been wonderful to work with. If you've not worked with her yet, I advise that you do. Getting the bonding in place does take a little bit longer for Schedule Bs. We are seeing a quicker turnaround time on those registration numbers. And don't forget that as you add or take things away from Schedule B, you also have to change your financial security in those numbers. So if you're going out there and you are adding treated water pits, if you're adding recycling pits, you have to get those bonded prior to construction. So make sure you remember to do that. The Schedule A pits, those are a little bit more lenient because you can register those and start construction prior to having that registration number. So those are some key takeaways on that. It's still a work in progress, but I think it's going pretty smooth so far. Better than CID did. So,
Are you seeing an effect that Chapter 4, some of those rules are having on either location designs, kind of the cost of operation?
yeah, so we've actually seen quite a few more operators in Texas starting to go more closed loop so that they actually don't have to worry about Schedule A and Schedule E. And, I feel saying from the environmental perspective, it's no, environmental impact on the ground, which alleviates your surface lane maintenance damages costs, pesing. Sure, your hauling costs might be higher, but it might make up for the pits, leaving them long term. If you've got 4 pits or for 4 paths that you know are going to be coming up over the next 2 years and having a pit there, well, if you drill that first path, then that Schedule A pit, you have to dewater it. You've got to remove everything out from it. Then you have to propose to the commission that that pit stay open instead of you filling it back in, or then having to go fill that one in and then do another one that you have that next pad of that same location. So at Phillips Point, you're seeing several companies just go to closed loop because they can move that in and out, as lots of environmental impact there. Over the second half of this year, we're also going to be tweaking and making some changes to Chapter 4 with the commission. It'll probably open back up at some point in time here in the near future, and we will be clarifying some language that we didn't quite get right the first time, expanding on a few things, defining things better, particularly freshwater pits that are long use term freshwater pits. That, kind of what we were discussing earlier, where you have a centralized facility that you're going to have multiple pads around. What do you do to keep those pits open after they are dewatered? What does that look like? So you'll see some of that come up here, like I said, the second half of the year. So make sure to chime in on those conversations so that we can really get some of this language cleared up and terminology more defined. So
The perception is that Chapter 4 is more of a negative to the small operators. If that is the case, or is that just a perception?
It can be a negative to the smaller operator, I mean, no question. In the scheme of things, it doesn't change how pits are really handled much compared to the old Rule 8. It's really not a big sea change in how the pits are operated. It does change how they're permitted, how they're authorized. The most important thing from a compliance standpoint is that every oil field pit you dig, effective last summer, has to be registered with the commission prior to excavate. And I suspect there's a large number of people in this room that probably not aware of that, but that has to be done. And then when it's finished, you deregister and it's done. It's not a permit, it's a registration.
Running out of time, I want to hit one more topic. Disposal wells and a lot of rule changes there becoming a much larger task in getting those permitted. Mark, thoughts on that?
Yes. UIC permitting in Texas has changed, especially if you operate the permit. The short answer is that instead of a 1/4-mile area of review, we now have a 2-mile area of review. So instead of 5 or 10, maybe 15 wells we have to identify and qualify for zonal confinement. I just had one I started the other day that has over 400 wells. The order of magnitude of the work required to get these permits it's not just an order of magnitude, it's several orders.
And those wells, most of you probably know this, but those wells, you're having to look at the producing zone and what type of data, because then it's just really gross.
You have to identify the well, its location, how the well's completed, where casing is set, where cement is. If the well's plugged, you have to evaluate the plugging, and you have to provide this information to the commission in a specified spreadsheet format. So it's quite an effort at data digging. There's a lot of work that has to go into this. The hardest part about it is finding the old records for the old plugs. The wells plugged in the early days of use. I recently did a permit in East Texas, and it had wells drilled in the teens. Those wells are over 100 years old. The old Form 1 and Form 4s don't have a lot of information on. So it can be tough in some of these older areas to get these permits to the specifications where UIC is comfortable issuing a permit. And this is a big change.
And I assume this is all tied to the amount of water that is being injected into those zones.
Yes, the commission, I think, finally realizes that the way industry realizes the pore space is becoming full. We're running out of injection capacity. And because of that, we're seeing region-wide pressure increases. There's actually been documentation in some places the ground is being uplifted because of this injection. There are places in Crane County, for instance, where the ground has lifted several inches to a foot because of this water injection. which if you think about it, we're jacking up the surface of the ground by putting water into it. What are the effects of that subsurface? And I don't know that we know them all, but the commission's aware of this, and they're trying to respond to protect the resources, but yet allow operators to get rid of the produced water. Because honestly, if we quit disposing of produced water, we'll quit producing oil. And we cannot allow that to happen. So I think it's incumbent that we work with the commission to solve these problems as partners and not in opposition.
On that, it's the TSP treat permits that we're going through right now for surface discharge that are for agriculture core. The ones that are going back into the Pegasus River. It's going to be an allotted amount of surface water that could be discharged into the Pegasus River over a period of time so that we can see that. To see that this produced water can be used and the other industries that it then will help build off of that. If we put this water back into the Pegasus River, well, then all of a sudden out here in West Texas, you now have a waterway where you can have agriculture, you can take care of your cattle, and it expands just more things, more revenue for the state, right? So using those produced water permits for the EPA, that's a big push. We've got 5 of them going through right now, not to be approved. And one thing I did want to say, I know we're short on time, to some of Mark's points here, the Permian it is a policy change. It was not a rule change. So that is a Permian specific policy that the UIC department is using right now. And again, the second half of this year for Texas, before we go into legislation, I think it's going to be very active. Because there is talk of Rule 9 and 46 being opened up. So if you own SWEs, if you operate SWEs, if you're a midstream company, you need to be involved in these conversations on what we can do from an operator side of things before the state hands us what will be the new rules. So as these come up in your trade conversations or in your circles, you need to be aware of these conversations and be involved in those.
Very good. I want to end with kind of a privilege question for each of the speakers here. If y'all have 60 seconds to look at Tam, to look at Chris, Austin, or any of the heads of the regulatory agency, what suggestions would you have on a particular issue or something that would be helpful to make it better for the industry or better for the state?
From a commission perspective, I would love to start having more meetings that are, the Chris and the Austin levels with either, the trade groups sitting down here or the operators having small meetings in Midland so we can take you guys out to the field more, show you those operations, and actually have the in-depth conversations in smaller settings than in a setting like this, or just a company coming and showing you their data, right, and running away for UIC stuff. I think those collaborative efforts together need to happen more.
Very good. Well, Karen, Mark?
You want me to go? I would say I know that the BLM is doing some of the sessions where they're offering training and information and that kind of thing, but I think for all industry, OCD on the New Mexico side, just having opportunities for training for people in regards to paperwork.
Mark?
I think that my best advice would be deal with the agencies and deal with them honestly and openly. They're not our enemy. We need to show them why we want to do things we want to do, get them to approve what we want to do. And in most cases, almost all cases, they listen, they evaluate. We are very lucky to have some of the people with these agencies that we deal with. Jeffrey Morgan here in Midland is wonderful to work with. Austin and Reed at UIC are great to work with. They're good people. They do want to help us. They're not our enemy. And I think that we need to stop looking at them as if they're against what we're trying to do.
So, all right. With regards to whether you're in Santa Fe or if you're in Austin, you need to lean on your district offices, and they need to be part of the decision-making process and about workflow development. There's a lot of experience on the ground here in Midland and through Hobbs and Lee that support them. And it's really important as we're setting up these, chains of command, that the people that are actually doing the work on the ground have a voice in the fight. And it's really just important that we understand that the people that are doing the day-to-day work may have some insights to share. And I think that is inclusive of us as corporations or small companies to really look at the frontline employee and to interview them and understand their challenges. Things are rapidly changing with regards to technology, and a lot of us just assume AI is going to take care of it. But the reality is it's not. This is a people business, and we have a lot of important insights to add.
Can I add one more thing?
Those, yes.
Thank you. One more thing is, our paperwork has increased over the last 5 years, like double, to these agencies and everything. And so we would hope that the budgets and the employee count could also match that.
See, that would be one of my points, is that if you look at the staffing levels and the experience level, that at the current payroll, no wonder you're had a turnover, and you're losing a lot of good people to industry, which is the benefit of a lot of the people here, that it hurts on the other side. Would you please show your appreciation to Terry, Philip, Mark, and Kristen for a wonderful eighth work. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure and check out Permian Basin Oil and Gas magazine for deeper industry coverage and analysis. Thanks to PBOG for supporting Oilfield Strong and helping to amplify these important conversations. Subscribe today at pbog.com.